Tonight, could we be 24 hours away from a ceasefire deal? Sources tell me an agreement could be signed as soon as tomorrow. Rapid developments this evening after the US president sent his envoy and his son-in-law to negotiations in Egypt.
It's something I think that will happen, got a good chance of happening. I may go there sometime toward the end of the week, maybe on Sunday, actually.
I've been told negotiators are cautiously optimistic we could soon see a hostage and prisoner release. We'll bring you everything we know so far, plus we'll have the latest on the showdown in Chicago. Donald Trump says Democratic leaders there should go to prison. That warning as around 200 troops arrive just outside the city, ready to be deployed, part of what the White House calls a crackdown on crime. Plus, the teenagers smuggled into Iran, then detained and beaten, why thousands of Afghans are being deported by Tehran. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening from Jerusalem. Things are moving quickly here. In the past few hours, my sources close to the negotiations between Israel and Hamas have told me they are cautiously optimistic a deal will be signed within 24 to 36 hours. That could mean that a pause in airstrikes and the release of hostages could happen by this weekend. But we have been here before, and we know that anything can change in the negotiating room. But the US president seems even motivated than more motivated than before to secure peace. Just have a listen to what he said in the past half an hour.
They're doing very well. We have a great team over there, great negotiators, and there are unfortunately great negotiators on the other side also. But it's something I think that will happen, got a good chance of happening. I may go there sometime toward the end of the week, maybe on Sunday, actually. And we'll see, but there's a very good chance negotiations are going along very well. We're dealing with Hamas and many of the countries. As you know, we have all of the Muslim countries are included. All of the Arab countries are included. Very rich countries and some that are not so rich, but just about everybody's included. It's never happened before. Nothing like that's happened before. And our final negotiation, as you know, is with Hamas. And it seems to be going well, so we'll let you know. If that's the case, we'll be leaving probably on Sunday, maybe Saturday, maybe a little later than Saturday evening, but that seems to be our schedule.
That was President Trump speaking a little earlier. Well, the talks have gained pace quite quickly after a few high-profile arrivals in Sharm el-Sheikh. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff was parachuted in to shepherd the talks, as was Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law. Doha has sent its Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al Thani. Turkey's intelligence chief Ibrahim Kalin is also involved in the negotiations. Israel's team is led by Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer, and the Hamas delegation is headed by Khalil al-Hayya. Well, our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons is with me here now. And Adam, suddenly, just in the last few hours, things have suddenly gained quite a momentum and quite a pace. We did kind of expect it. We knew that Steve Witkoff was going to be there alongside Jared Kushner today. It's
fascinating. It feels like this morning we knew there was progress, but it was kind of smoke signals. And now the smoke signals are billowing. People talking to you, people talking to me, and between the conversations you and I have had, there is a narrative emerging, an expectation of a deal. You're being told it could happen tomorrow. I'm being told it'll happen on Friday. And yet the outline of the deal feels like we can see it now. And I think what is crucial within this is the influence that is being exerted by Arab states on Hamas. According to what I'm hearing, they are telling Hamas, this is as good a deal as you're going to get. Don't keep fighting for things you can't win. You are going to get a prisoner exchange. My sources within the Israeli political scene are saying, yes, we will give up prisoners, people that we don't particularly want to give up, but we are prepared to do this. We want our hostages back. And I think crucially, we're looking at the first stage here. I think whether it's for good or worse, the latter question, some of them are going to be kicked into the long grass to get a ceasefire. Now, a lot of this is happening in back channels, but I think here's an interesting thing to listen to is Hakan Fidan, the Turkish foreign minister. I thought he was pretty clear about his optimism. This is what he had to say a bit earlier.
If an agreement is reached today, a ceasefire will be declared. Following the ceasefire, those held by both sides and agreed upon hostages and remains in Hamas's hands, those in Israel's custody serving life sentences up to a certain amount, a certain number of Palestinians arrested after October 7, will be released. There will be an exchange of these. This is the second article.
So there's the Turkish foreign minister there. Donald Trump, interestingly, said just in the last few minutes that, look, everyone is involved. You know, many leaders from across the Arab world, the Israelis, Hamas. He is basically saying, look, I've got everyone involved. I want this deal done. And he might potentially be coming to the region at the end of the week.
I think we have to admit that Donald Trump has had a huge influence on this. His optimism, his momentum. But also what I'm being told is that Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, for all the criticism they have had by a lot of people around the world, in this particular deal are carrying a lot of weight. That this transactional approach that Donald Trump and his team are bringing to this, about saying to people, you need stability in the Middle East. You need this for economic growth. You can't rely on oil. You need other things. You need to have a trade deal. And this is playing really well with some of these Arab nations. It's playing well with Israel. Now, Hamas having to take the brunt of this about being told this is as good as it's going to get. But some of the details that we're getting now, I'm being told that the UAE will provide military for a force, that the names of some of the people who are being talked about for the prisoner exchange, we're starting to get into some of that quite granular detail. And it is Friday, the Nobel Peace Prize, and remarkable. I mean, for a lot of people who think it can't be down to this, there are still people saying to me, that is a factor in this. Donald Trump wants to be talked about in the Nobel Peace Prize, even if he doesn't win it.
Adam, thank you so much. And of course, you will join us again later in the programme. Let's go straight to the United States and speak to our US correspondent, Mark Stone, who joins us live now from Washington. And Mark, what I'm hearing is cautious optimism. Everyone knows in some way we've been here before, but this time it feels different.
It does. Incidentally, on the Nobel Peace Prize, it's clear that Donald Trump is using this moment because he knows that Friday is the deadline. But it's also the case that the nominations for this year's prize needed to be in by January. So it seems very improbable that he would win it. Certainly not for this moment this year. But we know it's very important indeed to him. You're absolutely right. There is a sense of momentum of a type that we have not seen at all before. Sources I'm talking to are using the phrase endgame, that this is the moment, that the announcement by Hamas that it is willing to hand over all the hostages that are alive in one go, that clearly is new. And that, I think, is kind of the key for President Trump, that unlocks everything else, that allows him, with that commitment that Hamas has given, to be able to put pressure on the Israelis to offer concessions that they might not otherwise have been willing to do. He can put American pressure on Israel that he has been unwilling to put on before, because of that Hamas commitment to release all the living hostages. There is a question mark over several issues which are kind of underneath the momentum. First of all, the hostages that are no longer alive. Hamas has been quite clear that it believes that it doesn't know where many of these dead hostages are. Why? Because those that were holding them have been killed, and so they simply cannot find out where they are. So that will take time. But I'm told that from President Trump's perspective, that's not a problem necessarily. Get the ones who are alive out now in one go, and then once the ceasefire has taken shape, then those hostages that are no longer alive, that the search can begin to find their remains and to bring them home. There's also the question of disarmament, and I'm told that this is another sticking point. To what degree is Hamas willing and being demanded to disarm by Israel? Are we talking about only heavy weapons, or are we talking about small arms as well? There is, I can tell you, some disagreement between the Americans and the Israelis on that very issue, whether Hamas fighters who remain alive in Gaza will still be allowed to hold on to small arms that they may have. These sound like technical details, but they are absolutely key. So those are the sorts of issues. You talk about Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and the momentum that they have injected into the process. Absolutely true. My understanding is that they were given an agreement by President Trump that if needed, they could talk directly to Hamas. Now, we know that in the past, American officials have spoken and sat around a table with Hamas, but not at not at Witkoff and Kushner's level. President Trump gave them the green light to be able to do that if they thought it was necessary. What I don't know is whether those direct talks between Witkoff, Kushner and Hamas have actually taken place. But we're in a sense, there is now a genuine sense of real momentum in this process. Jared Kushner, Yalda, I'm told, appears now to be taking the lead in this, perhaps ahead of Steve Witkoff. So that's very interesting detail as well. And Donald Trump has now said, as you played in that clip, that he is preparing to travel to the Middle East. I wonder whether he would go to Sharm el-Sheikh by that stage, by Saturday, when he says he'd go. Sharm el-Sheikh might be kind of in the past. Perhaps he would go to Israel, to Jerusalem, to Tel Aviv, because the prize, the photo for President Trump's perspective would be him alongside the released hostages.
Indeed, Mark, and of course we will continue to follow those developments. Mark, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. Joining me now is Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel and a former military general. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us here on the programme. I just want to get your reaction to some of the news we're hearing coming out of Sharm el-Sheikh. Everyone that we've been speaking to, sources familiar with what is going on, say they are cautiously optimistic.
First of all, the Trump plan is very good news for Israel. Very good. Even the first 4 steps, which quite highly probably will be completed within the next 36 hours and be announced, namely the release of hostages, release of Palestinian prisoners, the withdrawal of Israel to certain mutually agreed lines, mainly dictated by the Americans, and having a formal announcement of end of war. The rest of the 16 will take more time and are not clear yet, but I'm still quite optimistic about them as well. There will be more difficulties. But having said that, for Israel, it's a great opportunity, something that we waited for a long time. Many Israelis argue that it could have been achieved many months ago, but for different reasons, probably doesn't make sense to go into them right now. It was delayed, and now it's happening. It's more than anything else, it's a result of the determination of Trump to get it done. He can dictate to Netanyahu as the same as dictated to him to make a U-turn of jets on the way to Iran just few months ago. And he can dictate to him, but his real success is to bring vis-a-vis Hamas, who is very kind of elusive kind of organization. They don't have any military anymore. As a military force, they were defeated more than a year ago. Now it's a type of guerrilla war that never ends. So he succeeded to bring not just those Arab leaders who do not like Hamas, like the Egyptians, Emiratis, or Saudis, but those who support Hamas. Qatar and mainly Turkey. We heard right now Fidan. Fidan is a very effective player in the Middle East. Formerly he was the head of intelligence, and Kalin, his successor, is now over there in Sharm el-Sheikh. Turkey, without Turkey and Qatar, Hamas has no choice but to accept the terms that are dictated. Of course, they expect it to be treated fairly, so to speak.
Prime Minister, do you think that, the kind of pressure you're talking about that President Trump has put on Benjamin Netanyahu, and you're saying Turkey and Qatar have put equal amount of pressure on Hamas, do you think that that pressure will continue and that this process will not collapse at some point? Because you said that you are optimistic that perhaps the 16 points that are quite tricky, that they will hold too.
Yeah, I hope and pray that they will hold. But about the first 4 points, they will be probably completed within the next 36 hours. The rest of the 16 might create some problems. I expect Trump to continue his pressure, and he can basically bring the terms. Both sides will have to make some compromises, but he can put an end to this war, which I believe personally the war on Gaza right now is a war of deception. It's nothing to do with the security interest or national interest of Israel. It's all about the survivability of Netanyahu's government. But that's my personal view. I'm not sure that Trump shares this view. But for him, especially if he won't get the Nobel Prize this year, there will be a great incentive for him to complete it during the next year in order to get it a year from now, which is also dependent upon the results of this whole story.
Prime Minister, I also wanted to ask you about, Hamas being disarmed, for example, and vowing not to govern Gaza. If they don't do that, do you think that Benjamin Netanyahu will again find an excuse to launch some kind of assault on Gaza?
Look, October 7 created a compelling imperative for Israel to make sure that Hamas will never reign over the Gaza Strip and can threaten Israel from there. That's a compelling imperative. That what justified the war, and the war was successful against Hamas more than a year ago. And as a result of development, you also inflicted major blow on Hezbollah, seized the opportunity to destroy a lot of the military capabilities of Syria, and that opened the road to Iran, and Iran suffered a major blow. So we could, many months ago, could announce victory and get it to end. So it's not about the opportunity. There will be problems. For example, Hamas as a fighting army is not there anymore. He cannot repeat the 7th of October. But as a guerrilla force, they can fight forever. There always will be small arms. The idea that you can find every small arms among 2.2 million people is total delusion, totally detached from reality. Even in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, where we are reigning over 2 or 2.5 or 3 million Palestinians, for 58 years, there are still at least tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands weapons. Even in Israel itself, within proper Israel, among non-Jewish communities, there are certain communities where every family has certain kind of small arm. So it's an illusion. It's just the idea that you can dismantle every Kalashnikov from Hamas is just an illusion. It's setting a target that cannot be achieved. The only way to defeat Hamas, and we told it from day one when Biden was still a president, only way to defeat Hamas is to replace it by a different entity, which is legitimate by international law, by international community, by the members to the peace agreement, namely Egypt and Jordan, the members of Abraham Accord, namely Emirates and others, and legitimate in the eyes of the Palestinians themselves. Legitimacy is the code name of what could be done and not. If we try, Israelis, to impose upon the other side things which are not legitimate in their mind, it won't work. And even with Turkey and Qatar, there is a need always to find a fine line where somehow all the players have certain amount of satisfaction. In fact, the mentioning of Tony Blair is very well fit into this role because he knows the place, he knows the people, he knows the nuances of how to establish some compromise without insulting or humiliating any side. And he has a lot of experience from the quartet and for his term as a prime minister. He could be a good, very good kind of agents to help it happening.
Well, Prime Minister Ehud Barak, we're really grateful for all of your thoughts here on the programme this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yalda.
That was Ehud Barak speaking to me there. Well, let's hear from the other side now and, of course, bring in a political analyst and former advisor to the Palestine Liberation Organization, Xavier Abu Eid. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us here on the programme. We're just speaking there to Ehud Barak. We're speaking to people across the region. Just your thoughts, your views on what you're hearing this evening, that within the next 24 hours or 36 hours, we could see some kind of deal being struck between the two sides.
Thank you, Yalda. I think what you have been hearing is correct. Many people, including people I personally spoken to in Egypt, are very optimistic that something may be announced in the next hours. Now, the question is, what is going to be announced? Because so far, what we know from this initiative is that within the first 72 hours, all Israeli captives are going to go home. There will be a number of Palestinian prisoners that will be released. And Israel will withdraw its forces to something like 50% of Gaza. And so far, that's the only thing that it's granted if both parties agree. And we are talking here about a state, and I think your previous guest knows very well, because he was an expert on doing this, that has never implemented a single agreement signed with the Palestinians. They have never honored a single agreement from Oslo up until now. So the question here is, what will be the role of the third party, of the mediators, of the guarantors, in order to make sure that a second and third stages of this plan are going to be implemented?
We just heard from Ehud Barak saying that the only way to reach lasting peace is for the Palestinians themselves, not Hamas, but the Palestinians, a group of technocrats or others who could come together and lead the Palestinian people, but that they don't want to see Hamas anywhere near governing the Gaza Strip. Do you believe that a group like that can emerge? Are they anywhere near the talks right now? Are they being consulted? Are you aware of that at all?
I don't think it's up to Mr. Barak or to any Israeli official or former official to set what are the conditions are to have peace. I think there is an international consensus that in order to achieve a comprehensive peace, we need to end Israeli occupation, which is the main obstacle in order to have peace. So this is not about setting a new group of Palestinian technocrats or not. It's the most important point here is that Palestinians are those that should rule over Gaza, that we should not set a different legal status for Gaza as opposed to the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory, particularly the West Bank, that we should not have an international sort of mandate into Gaza that will be, according to this plan, actually legislating on behalf of Palestinians, people that have not been elected by any Palestinian. Formulas that we saw that in the past failed, particularly in Iraq, and they are trying to bring them back here to Palestine. So I think one of the most important points here is to regain Palestinian sovereignty over Palestine, and that's the only way to have legitimacy in order to keep moving forward.
You've talked about other negotiations in the past that have not been honoured. Are you hopeful, are you optimistic that perhaps with someone like Donald Trump in the White House, who uses unconventional tactics to bring people around a negotiating table, that perhaps this time might be different?
Yalda, I think every single Palestinian wants this genocide to end. And talking with some people in Gaza, one of the most important points within the summary of what they've been telling me is that accepting the agreement is bad, but also rejecting the agreement is bad as well. The priority here should be for the attacks to end, for the killings to end. And that, of course, it's why many people are hopeful that something will come out within the next hours. But I would also like to make clear that there is a difference between setting the principle for a ceasefire deal and going into a comprehensive and meaningful peace process. So the points we have seen so far are about how to end, to have a ceasefire, but not about how to set the basis for an Israeli withdrawal, ending the occupation, which once again, it's a basis for any lasting peace in our region.
And there have been those who have criticised the lack of detail in this. But I guess the question is, do you think this is now starting to move in the right direction? I've spoken to many Palestinians who say, look, we were stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like you say, they wanted the bombing, the assault on Gaza to end, so they felt they needed to agree to this deal. But there is concern that this the idea of where this wants to go, this deal, is perhaps throwing the Palestinians under the bus.
I think President Trump, what he's trying to do now is actually to be the person who cares about Israeli interests much more than Benjamin Netanyahu. So in other words, he understands that there is an international isolation of Israel. He wants to end this. He understands that many Israelis want the captives to go back home, and he wants to do that. Now, the question is that he could have done at least ending this genocide just by having a phone call. Our American weapons that are being used against our people in Gaza and elsewhere in Palestine. So far, I think that there was a miscalculation for Mr. Netanyahu when he decided to attack Qatar that changed the whole scenario, that made President Trump push himself more into reaching an agreement. But also, Yalda, there is a very important point. We still fail to identify a clear U.S. policy in this region. I don't know if this is lack of policy or if this is more than one policy. Are we going to talk about Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador who claims that there is nothing called Palestinian people, that there is no occupied territory, that it is Judea and Samaria, and that God gave this land to the Israelis? Or is it President Trump now that's saying that he wants to achieve an agreement for both sides? So, in other words, I don't think that it's very reliable so far, but we should be hopeful, at least, to be able to end the genocide as soon as possible.
And you say you're hopeful that you want to see an end to this current situation. Are you hopeful, though, and what is your hope for the future of your people?
Of course, the hopes is for national liberation. The hopes is to end occupation. The hopes to rebuild Gaza is to be able to reunify Gaza and the West Bank. There is a big share of this that has to be taken by the Palestinian leadership. There has to be, of course, a Palestinian leadership that will include everyone and that will be able to guide this process forward. But also, we are at the same time, we are at a point where Israel is not just attacking Hamas on one side, they're also strangulating the Palestinian Authority on the other side. There are military aggressions every day. You are now in the occupied West Bank. You have seen how Israeli forces enter every single day into Palestinian cities, particularly Ramallah, where the headquarters of the Palestinian Authority are. So here we see that there is a clear Israeli attempt to eliminate any prospects of a Palestinian political agency, of a Palestinian political leadership, and of course, by doing this, to eliminate the prospects of implementing the Palestinian right to self-determination.
Xavier Abu Eid, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you, Yalda.
Let's talk now to Nadav Ayal. He is an Israeli journalist and a senior scholar at the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. Thank you very much, Mr. Ayal, for joining us on the programme. There is this momentum building up. We're speaking to different sources across the region. There is some kind of optimism that this could be the moment. What are you hearing and what do you think about the current situation?
I'm hearing much more than cautious optimism right now coming from Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Both Israeli sources, Arab sources, and American sources are saying that they are right now in the fine details of getting into an agreement. I can go into the specifics. It's mostly about the identity of the Palestinian prisoners that are going to be released from Israeli jails, where they are serving life sentences, sometimes for suicide bombings or other attacks or planning other attacks. It's about the level of Israeli withdrawal, at the first phase. But basically, the first element of this deal to end the war in Gaza is already here. They decided to work through the night, and they're going to work all the way to tomorrow morning. They're trying to get an agreement, as you said, Yolanda, by the next 24 hours, 36 hours. And President Trump just said that he might travel to the region.
Yes, as you say, we've been hearing this as well. Just on the point, the sticking point of the Palestinian prisoners, because I am also hearing that this has become quite a sensitive issue. Just talk us through the split, because there are a couple of hundred that basically Israel says they don't want to release, and then there's roughly about 1,700 that were arrested after October 7 that perhaps they're not as cautious about releasing at this point.
Yeah, well, the crux of the matter is, of course, those serving life sentences for murder or for planning these kind of terror attacks in Israel. And I remind us that it was Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, that ordered the October 7 invasion into Israel, that was released in such a hostage deal, the Shalit deal, years and years ago. And the prime minister back then who authorized that, or the government that authorized that, was a Netanyahu government. In order to get one Israeli soldier back to Israel, Israel agreed to release 1,000 or more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. Many of them were convicted of murder, including Sinwar himself, who was murdering Palestinians that he saw as collaborators in Han Yunis. So for Israel, releasing some of these names could be actually an inception point for the next war with Hamas. And this is the reason that both sides are negotiating. Hamas wants to get as many as its most well-known prisoners out. It also is aiming to get some points within the Palestinian society, for instance, demanding the release of Marwan Barghouti, who's actually associated with Fatah, with the other movement of the Palestinian society, not with Hamas, in order to say to the Palestinian public, this is the way in which Hamas is fighting for everyone, not only for this faction. And Israel wants to release as little as possible of Hamas operatives that can actually launch more attacks against Israel in the coming years. So they're really bargaining on the names right now. It's name against name. It's the sort of deals that you see in these kind of negotiations. You're absolutely right that there are names that are easier to release. Hamas was also demanding the release of its Nokhba terrorists, the same terrorists that were responsible for these attacks and murders, mass murders across the Israeli southern border. And they wanted them released too. These are men that were captured 2 years ago, basically within the sovereign state of Israel doing that. And it's up to the Israeli government to make that decision. We will need to see a government decision about this. This is the Israeli law. In order to release these men, you would need to see a government decision, and the families will be able to appeal to the Supreme Court in Israel, but the Supreme Court has never accepted any appeal against an Israeli government decision towards a hostage deal.
Well, we'll have to see how this all evolves over the coming days. Mr. Nadav Ayal, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
You're watching The World. We've still got lots more coming up on the programme. The latest flashpoint in Trump's immigration crackdown. The National Guard amasses outside Chicago. We'll speak to those in the city.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Welcome back. I'm Yalda Hakim, live here in Jerusalem. And of course, we are following the developments that are taking place here, the optimism around this potential peace deal that President Trump is trying to get over the line, currently taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh. But just for the next few minutes, I want to focus on the city of Chicago, where a dramatic showdown is underway between the US president and city and state leaders. It's over Donald Trump's desire to send in the National Guard to quell protests against his immigration raids. Just have a look at this video. It was posted by the Homeland Security Secretary this weekend. These ICE raids have been going on for several weeks. More than 1,000 people have been arrested, and the tactics have become increasingly violent. That's led to almost daily demonstrations outside detention facilities. If you listen to the White House, well, the city is a crime-riddled war zone.
There's no place in the world, including you can go to Afghanistan, you can go to places that you would think of. They don't even come close to this. Chicago is a hellhole right now. Look, I have an obligation. This isn't a political thing. I have an obligation.
Well, that was the president last month. But despite what he claims, this is a political thing. Just have a look at the places targeted so far. Portland, Los Angeles, Memphis, Washington, and now Chicago. All cities in blue states run by the Democrats. Critics believe Donald Trump is trying to foment violence to justify sending in troops. He's even threatened to invoke an anti-insurrection law to sidestep any court orders blocking him. Let's get more analysis now on this, and let's just have a listen to this first. Actually, let's bring in our US correspondent, David Blevins, who joins us live now from Chicago. And David, as I was just saying there, President Trump is saying this isn't political at all. He wants to crack down on crime, bring back in law and order, the kind of language we continue to hear from him. But of course, his critics, his opponents say this is absolutely political.
Yes, and because of those different viewpoints, Chicago is a city on edge right now because people do not know what will happen next. 200 National Guard troops from Texas have mobilized on the outskirts of this city. Another 300 from here in Illinois are on standby, and the expectation has been that they will deploy today. Now, we've been to an ICE facility just outside the city that has seen lots of protest in recent days. There were no troops there yet, and to be honest, no real sign of any need for them. The president says they're being deployed to protect immigration agents and to fight crime. But the city's officials say Chicago is a safe place and there is no need for troops on the street. The governor, J.B. Pritzker, says the president is punishing Democrat-run cities and accusing him of sowing chaos so that he can impose martial law. That's the language he uses. Now, the president, of course, would deny that, but Donald Trump says the governor and the mayor should both be arrested, and he's accusing them of endangering the lives of immigration agents. And he is now threatening to invoke the Insurrection Act, which is a 200-year-old law that has been used, I think, only once since the race riots and the anti-war protests of the 60s, and that was to quell disorder in Los Angeles in 1992. But there is a real fear in these communities. We've spent some time with the Hispanic community. They say they're feeling sad, they're feeling helpless, and there is a very real concern that the president will carry out his threat. Our colleagues at NBC are hearing from sources in the White House that this has moved from a debate there about whether to impose the Insurrection Act to when they will impose the Insurrection Act.
And David, just very briefly, I mean, the idea of moving the National Guard from one state to another is also just something that is not, commonplace. And that sort of left many people concerned and worried about these actions.
Yeah, that is highly unusual, and I suppose that explains why the president is considering using the Insurrection Act, because that gives him permission to deploy the military on the streets of the United States in a case of civil unrest or national emergency. But no national emergency has been called at this stage, and it also explains why there are so many court challenges. In Portland, Oregon, for example, a judge has already blocked the federal government's attempt to deploy troops there, and here in Chicago, a federal judge has deferred that decision until tomorrow. She says she wants to hear the full argument, but I think that, I suppose, fuels the speculation that the government might act first and deploy those National Guard troops onto the streets of Chicago, perhaps even before the end of today, Yalda.
David, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there. Now, the US president has also been harnessing the power of the federal government to target his enemies. Today, former FBI Director James Comey pleaded not guilty to criminal charges. He's been accused of lying to Congress and obstructing an investigation. He entered the plea via his lawyer in court in Virginia. You remember he was fired months into Donald Trump's first presidency while he was in the middle of an investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. The trial will begin on January the 5th. Now, elsewhere, Afghans who've been kicked out of Iran after fleeing the country in hope of a safer life have told Sky News they face violence and beatings as part of Tehran's crackdown on migrants. Iran has deported 1.3 million Afghans this year, and now many say they are desperate to get back home. Iran, which says it hosts more than 4 million undocumented Afghans, has been stepping up deportations for months following a rise in anti-Afghan sentiment. Our Asia correspondent Cordelia Lynch has this report from the Iran-Afghanistan border.
On a dusty, sweltering border, an influx of Afghans, dumped back to the homeland they tried to escape. These just some of the 1.3 million deported from Iran this year. Many with tales of violent arrests. Some trying to show us their bruises.
They took all my money by force. They took everything I had and sent me back to Afghanistan. They even beat me. They injured my ear. Is this how Islam is supposed to be practiced?
We've seen waves of people coming through here in the past few hours, some alone, some in groups, some in families, all facing very uncertain futures. At its peak, as many as 28,000 people have come through in one single day, some with just the clothes on their back.
Iran has rounded up and paraded Afghans online. These videos posted by police on social media. Tehran claims it can't afford to keep those living there illegally anymore. Fatima was among them. She says her family went there to escape poverty.
My two daughters worked from 6 in the morning until 8:30 at night, but they were never paid. The Iranians didn't give them any money.
Other children crossed alone, smuggled illegally. At just 15, Tahir is the breadwinner of his family, supporting 6 siblings and 2 parents. He's fearful of staying.
I love my homeland deeply, and I'm even ready to sacrifice my life for it. But if there is no work here, how can I survive? I have a family, and they have expectations of me. I have to work.
Tahir looks daunted, and he's not alone. These are just some of the many unaccompanied children flowing through here every day. The UN is taking them to nearby Herat, hoping to reunite them with their families. This is home for a day or two. But Tahir's disorientated. He says he's only just left a brutal detention centre in Iran.
They would force us to lie down on the concrete floor and kick us. In the detention rooms, if someone spoke up, they would be forced to lie on the ground. If they protested, they would be sent to a dark cell.
What do you fear will happen if you're not able to return to Iran?
I would rather kill myself than see my father begging for money for his hungry children. I couldn't bear it.
Nearly every single one of these boys says they were smuggled to Iran and beaten. But listen to this.
How many of you want to return to Iran? Wow.
We put their allegations of assault to the Iranian government, but no one responded to our request for comment. Others fled to Iran for an education. Girls are no longer able to go to secondary school in Afghanistan.
Every day brought a new restriction, a new policy aimed at preventing women from working. There was the compulsory niqab and also limitations on education for women and girls. When you see the future of your daughter, of your children, slipping away day by day, it's devastating.
How do you feel coming back to Afghanistan now, not being able to go to school?
I feel so sad. I used to recite poetry at school, but when the Taliban came to my city, I could not write or recite a single poem.
Tahir hasn't been home for 2 years. It's a bittersweet journey back. His siblings delighted to see him. His mother moved, relieved, but also torn.
Have you told your mum yet what your experience was like in Iran?
No, I have not told her anything. She has no idea where I was or what happened during my 16 days in detention.
Did you feel you had no choice?
Well, life here was very hard for him. We have a delivery cart, but with that alone, he couldn't pay for himself and also take care of me. He needs a stable life and a future.
It's a dynamic playing out across Afghanistan. Huge burdens on young shoulders and a country unable to share the load. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Herat in Afghanistan.
Cordelia Lynch reporting there. Let's just remind you of the breaking news this evening, with sources telling us that a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas could be less than a day away. Well, let's bring in our Middle East correspondent, Adam Parsons, who has been here with me. What a night. In many ways, Adam, if we go back 2 years ago on October the 7th, I mean, it really did, that moment sort of shocked the world. And in that moment, it felt, I don't know how it felt for you, but I felt like things were not going to be the same again. And it has felt like that over the course of the last 2 years. Yesterday, we marked the 2-year anniversary. It's quite remarkable how quickly they've gotten to this place. I know it's been 2 years, but it has broken down so many times. And just over the course of the last few days, it feels like we may finally be there.
It's extraordinary, the speed with which this has happened. And also, you're reminded that yesterday was October the 7th. We were talking about this day, this consequential day. And this time yesterday, when you and I were talking, we were still sort of quite vague about, well, it seems like there's progress. It seems like they're going in the right direction. Fast forward 24 hours, and here we are talking about when's the deal. I think we're almost like accepting now there'll be an announcement. Will it be 24 hours? Will it be 36? Could it come Friday? Trump is talking about flying out on Sunday, potentially to greet hostages as they're released. Suddenly, after 2 years, during which there were long periods when it felt like nothing much was happening other than Gaza being bombed, suddenly things are going into fast forward. I believe there's still negotiations carrying on at the moment, and they are moving into pretty granular detail. The people that both you and I are talking to about this first stage, and I think for the first time, I'm beginning to allow myself to think this is going to happen. Now, all the normal caveats, so many false dawns before, and indeed ceasefires that have failed, and yet now the impetus, the momentum that you talk about, Yalda, is definitely there.
Yeah, and we can go into some of the details that people are concerned about with this particular plan. But I was speaking to, just in the last half an hour ago or so, to the former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who said we had multiple opportunities. This could have happened a year ago. We could have seen the death toll in Gaza not be as high as it has been, because, frankly, Israel achieved its objective. So what was the last year about? It could have happened, for example, when, most of the tunnels had been, Hamas tunnels were exploded. Or it could have been when Hezbollah was decapitated. Or it could have been during that 12-day war with Iran. But here we are. And, 251 hostages were taken. 1,200 people were killed. 67,000 Palestinians have been killed over the course of the last 2 years. And we know that there are 20 hostages that Donald Trump wants released, more or less immediately, as soon as this deal is struck.
Yeah, all of that is true. I mean, that point, and I think we're going to hear it repeated again and again, is this deal so very different from a deal that Joe Biden put forward? Could this deal not have been done a long time ago? Could a lot of lives not have been saved? And actually, I mean, remember, this ground offensive that is happening at the moment, I think by common consent, Eyal Zamir, who's the chief of staff of the Israel Defense Forces, hasn't said it publicly, but it's been so widely reported that he opposed to this. When I was in Gaza City, you speak to members of the IDF, they're tired, they give you the impression that they really just want the hostages and they want to wind this up. They don't really buy into the fact that this offensive needed to happen. So even within the Israeli military, there is both weariness and also uncertainty about whether this had to happen. What's been achieved over the past year, I think probably the very right-wingers who support Benjamin Netanyahu may still not be happy. They wanted Hamas to be ground into the dirt, and they, to an extent, wanted to annex Gaza. But the reality is the rest of the Middle East, the rest of this region, has had enough of this war. They've had enough of the disruption. They are worried about the spillover. They want this done with. And now that Donald Trump has given them momentum, they're more than happy to sign up to a deal.
Yeah, 2 years ago, Joe Biden gave Benjamin Netanyahu a bear hug and said, we are here to support you after October 7. When Donald Trump arrived, he had that moment, sort of that temporary ceasefire that he had the day before inauguration to say, look, I can do this. That broke down pretty quickly. And at every sort of meeting he had with Benjamin Netanyahu, the feeling was that Benjamin Netanyahu continued to buy time from him. I'm almost there. Just give me a little bit more time. And it feels like over the course of the last couple of weeks, the penny just dropped for Donald Trump. He spoke to Muslim majority leaders, Arab leaders, and he thought, enough is enough. I need this deal now.
Well, you were in New York, and I think that from the outside, from watching here, I just wonder whether that meeting at the UN General Assembly, when the Arab states got together and met Donald Trump and seemed to convince him that he had to get a deal done. And then we all heard this story. He believes, he remembers the last person he spoke to. And then Trump spoke to Netanyahu, and he seemed this time not to be swayed by Netanyahu. It seemed that he was still going to that meeting saying, look, the Middle East thinks this. All the other countries have told me this. Why don't you go along with it? And I think particularly the like of the Jared Kushner saying you've got to think about the commercial impacts of doing a deal and how much that would help.
I'm just being told that just in the last few minutes, we don't have the images, but I'm being told, and this is a bit of breaking news, that a note was handed to Donald Trump by his Secretary of State, his National Security Advisor, Marco Rubio, that a deal is very, very close. And you know, this evening I was also told by some of my sources that an initial statement may come out tonight, that the sticking point was those Hamas prisoners. But we are hearing that Donald Trump has been handed this note by Marco Rubio to say that a deal could be imminent, that they're just literally, you know, putting together the final details. So we may see this happen this evening, early hours of tomorrow. Adam, thank you so much for all of your analysis. Do stay with us as we continue to follow this developing news on the News at 10 in the next few minutes.